Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. I know that there was an issue with echoing. If that continues, do let us know. But I'll get started now, as we have about an hour and a half and there's a lot to get through. So welcome, thanks for coming today. And this is the 2024 Early Career Grants Application Guidance webinar. So my name is Shan. I am the Grants Manager at the Royal Society of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. I also have with me Nisreen, our Membership Manager, Amelia, our Senior Manager, and Io, our Administrative Assistant. So I've only been in post for just over a month. So whilst I'll try and give as much detail as possible and answer as many questions as I can, they will be there to help me along the way. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the agenda for today. And what we'll plan to do is the presentation will take hopefully about an hour and then maybe about 20 to 30 minutes for questions. So Nisreen will start us off by introducing RSTMH, and at that point we'll take a quick pause for any questions related to the organisation, and then myself and Amelia will run through the Early Career Grants Programme. And then this should leave us some time at the end to answer some questions you may have. I'm hoping that a lot of the questions you will have will be answered as we go through the presentation, but please feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A box. Realistically, at the end, we won't be able to answer all your questions, and so we'll try and focus on the most important ones, and we will collate any unanswered questions and send our responses after. We'll also share the recording. Just a few house rules regarding questions. Do try and avoid asking a question if you've already seen that it's in the Q&A box. Instead, you should be able to upvote any questions that you like the look of. And then we can choose the highest voted questions at the end. And please use the Q&A function for questions only. And also, if you have any questions related to like individual applications or topics, we won't be able to answer them here. So please feel free to send me an email after. So I think that's everything for the moment. Once again, welcome, and it's over to Nisreen.
Hi everyone, it's so nice to see so many of you joined us today. So as Shan mentioned, I am Nisreen, I'm the membership manager here, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we do and some of our membership benefits for you today. So Io, if you could put on to the next slide. So who we are and what we do. We were established in 1907 in the UK. We are a membership body for people working and interested in tropical medicine and global health globally as a charity, and then we're also a membership through subscription. We have over 1,700 members in more than 100 countries around the world, and we've got a network of 20,000 researchers and professionals like yourself that have joined today. And we're a very small team of 8 with almost 1,000 volunteers helping us do all the wonderful things that we do. If you can move on to the next slide. What we aim to do and how we do it. We aim to save lives, eliminate disease, improve equality and access to health. We achieve our aims by supporting and helping our members just like yourself and some of us who are not members yet. We are trying to bring about change in research, funding, policy and awareness. And we do this through the strength of our members' collective knowledge and expertise, which we share very regularly, and using our unique position as an independent organisation. Some of the activities that we deliver. So we offer a very broad range of activities to our members through our network. We publish 2 peer-reviewed journals, Transactions, which is monthly for our members, and Intellectual Health, which is every 2 months for all. We also have global meetings and events. global early career grants research and professionals. That's why we're here today. And we also provide travel scholarships for our events. You're also eligible as a member to be awarded through our medals and awards program to celebrate the success of our members. We also provide lots of guidance and training for our members across the world. We also have an additional website, which is Grow Health website, which allows you to find out more about courses, funding, jobs, PhD research and voluntary payments through our partners and our collaborators. Just to go over a few of our membership benefits, a very new and exclusive membership benefit this year that we have introduced, which is our members have new access to the RSTMH funded early career grants. So anyone who is a member and applies for early career grants this year will be eligible for the specific funding that's specifically for our members. We also, as I mentioned, have access to our peer review journals, transactions, and you've also got a 10% discount to open access fees on our journals. So if you are interested in publishing, it's a very great benefit for you. We also have eligibility, as I mentioned earlier, to our medals and awards program, which runs every single year. And we currently have quite a few medal awards that have just been announced. So do look out for those if you are interested and currently a member or become a member. We've also got discounted rates to all of our meeting events, as well as access to the scholarships even to our events. And also we have access to our country ambassador and student ambassador programs. We've also got a fortnightly newsletter that contains exclusive news and opportunities to be a part and shape the global health community. So here's just a quick rundown of our membership pricing. Student price is only £20 for membership. You've also got the retired fellow, retired fees, early careers, and we've also got a very low price for lower income country membership, which is £30. If you are interested in becoming a member with us today, we are providing a 20% discount with the discount code grants 2024. As I mentioned, it is a unique opportunity to join today, especially if you are interested in applying for grants as you join the webinar. As I mentioned earlier, we have an exclusive funding for RSTMH members this year. And if you've already applied and you are a member, you will still be put towards that eligibility criteria for that funding. So if you've got any questions, I'm just going to open the floor for any questions right now.
Thanks, Nisreen. Just to say that these are questions about membership and RSTMH. We'll answer the ones about the grants program towards the end.
Don't think I see any membership questions coming through. So I will hand it over back to Sean, but if you do have any questions for me and you are interested in joining, if you haven't already joined, please do drop me an email. It will be shared in the box there for everybody. So if not, you can also go to the website. You'll find my email address there as well. Thank you. Sean, handing it.
Thank you, Nisreen. And thank you, Ayo. Yeah, if you do have any questions about becoming a member, please do drop Nisreen an email. So the Early Career Grants Program, this program is aimed at early career researchers and professionals who are in the field of tropical medicine or global health. So we award up to £5,000 per grant for projects lasting up to 1 year. And it's specifically for individuals who have not received funding of this amount or more in their name before. And we'll talk about this as part of eligibility later on in the presentation. Applicants can be of any nationality from anywhere in the world. And if you look at the map actually at the bottom of this slide, which is a snapshot of where all our 2023 applicants were based, you can see just how geographically diverse our pool of applicants is. And just a note in terms of the type of person applying for a grant, we often get questions from potential applicants asking if we only accept applications from researchers at academic institutions. And the answer to this is not at all. We have funded plenty of awardees who are based at NGOs, government organizations, hospitals, in industry, We've funded clinical research, social science research, vet research, nursing research. And the purpose of this program really is to encourage and empower individuals to carry out research projects that can have an impact on global health. And so we recognize that this covers a wide range of backgrounds and disciplines. Next slide, please. So just a bit of background about the grants program and its growth in recent years. So the program itself at RSTMH has been around for about 40 years now, but it was in 2017 that it started growing into what it is today. If you look at this graph here, you can see that the number of applications has increased significantly year on year. But I think what's important for you to note is that alongside this year-on-year rise in applications due to partner funding, we have more capacity now to award more projects. So we funded 17 back in 2017, but in 2022 we funded 200, and it's looking likely we'll fund about 230 from 2023. And so what might not be overly clear on this graph is that the chances of receiving funding have grown as well. So whereas in 2018, you had a 1 in 36 chance of receiving a RSTMH grant, that dropped to 1 in 19 in 2019. And for the last 3 years, it's steadied at about 1 in 10. Next slide, please. And so the program has changed not only in terms of numbers, but the makeup of our applicants and awardees as well. And this is particularly evident when it comes to gender. So we're really proud that over the last 4 to 5 years, we've been closing the split between male and female awardees. And we know firsthand that it is difficult to support and recognize the success of females and males equally in this field. And so it's great to see that we've gone from 40% female awardees back in 2019 to over 50% today. And at this point, I am going to hand over, to Amelia, who's going to take you through eligibility and scope.
Thank you, Sian. So to our early career definition to apply for a grant is you should not have had research funding in your own name before of more than £5,000 or the equivalent in other countries in currencies. So we don't define early career strictly, but you should be able to carry out research under supervision, have the ambition to develop knowledge in your selected research area or on your research topic, have a good understanding of the field of study that you've selected, and also demonstrate the ability to produce data under supervision, use the critical analysis and evaluation, and also be able to generate new ideas for your project. And we really would like you to completely explain the outcome of your research. And in terms of eligibility, for those who can apply, so anyone early in their career stage with a research topic related to global health or tropical medicine, which I'll go into detail in a little bit. More experienced professionals who are new to research, that's why we don't define early career. So you may be early in your second career. RSTH members and non-members are able to apply, and those who have previously applied but have been declined. So if you applied last year, we would welcome your application this year. And those individuals who are RSTMH members who have received a travel grant are also able to apply. Students can also apply. However, the grant cannot be used towards tuition fees. So it could be used towards the project part of perhaps your PhD or your master's. For those who cannot apply are individuals who are not early in their career, as per the definitions that we've just talked about. If you have already been awarded a grant, if you are supervising an RSTMH grant or are a global assessor reviewing our grants this year, you are unable to apply. Let's talk a little bit more about eligibility. In terms of to receive the grant, you will need a personal bank account. Our grants are paid into individuals' banks, not into your institution. You need contact details for the duration of your project and for the next 2 years. You need a supportive supervisor for the duration of your project. As you can see, a good supervisor is key to your grant application. Your application needs 2 references from a supervisor and a senior member from your organization by the grant deadline. And these references will only be sent once you have finished your application. You need to start your project between September and December 24, and the form needs to be in English. You cannot submit more than 1 application, so you can't submit sort of an application for 2 different projects. Apply as part of a pair or a group or on behalf of your individual or your institution. And you can't apply for funding that a project that has already been started or a project that you've already completed. Once you have applied, you are unable to change your project. So those are things like your budget. We understand that there are changes in currencies, but unfortunately at that point, we are unable to accept any changes. And say if you left your institution, you are unable to transfer the grant to someone else. However, you are able to transfer the grant to a different institution. In terms of scope of grants, the projects can be on clinical or scientific research or fieldwork. They can be standalone projects or distinct elements with a larger project. Applications can be on any disease area or health area of tropical medicine or global health that affects low resource settings. So this could include infectious diseases, NTDs, malaria, TB, HIV, climate change, maternal health, and so forth. You can see the list here. However, this is just a small summary. I would really advise you to look at our website. You can see all of the previous projects that we funded with their titles and their countries, which gives you a real flavour of what we have previously funded. In terms of the scope of grants, that being said, in terms of topics, we really do rely on funding from our partners to enable our grant program. And some of their funding criteria is more detailed than ours. And so that's in terms of the topic areas they will fund. Next slide, please, Io. So you can see our funders there. For example, JCPET only focuses on One Health. For more details about our partners and their funding criteria, you can see our grants page on our website. So please do have a look at that after. Next slide, please, Io. I'll pass back to Sian. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amelia. So I just thought I would run through the timeline before we start with the application form. This is the timeline that we are working towards for 2024. We opened at the end of January and applications need to be in by the 22nd of April. So that's 12 p.m. British summertime. And then the assessment period will take us up until August, and we should be awarding funding in September. Projects then need to start within 3 months of funding, so that will take us to December of this year. Then it takes a year for the project to take place, so that takes us to December 2025. And then a final report needs to be written within 3 months after that, so that's March 2026. Note that this timeline is based on previous years and average numbers that we expect to receive, but it all depends on the number of applications we get. If there are any delays, we will let you know as soon as possible. And what we would say is that we have to be quite strict with our timings. And if you don't think that you can work to these timings, we would ask you to reconsider whether you should apply this year and maybe hold off until you're in a better position to apply. Next slide, please. So the application form, there is a PDF version of the form on our webpage, which one of us will drop into the chat now. And I would really suggest that you look at this whilst I'm talking about the form. Just to be clear, that you cannot fill out this form and email it to us, but it's good to take a look at the questions that we will ask you before you start writing your application form via our submittable portal. So I'll just wait for that link to go into the chat. Okay, whilst that's getting ready, just to sort of let you know that our application form is relatively straightforward. You'll know that some application forms can be really complex when it comes to applying for research grants. And we've made it as straightforward as possible because we realize that this program is for individuals who are at the early stages of their research career. But for us to fully understand and assess the robustness of your application, there is a certain level of detail that we do require. And it's also good practice for you as you go on in this field. Let me see if I can find the link. Thank you, Amelia. So if you click this link on the grants page, at the bottom of the page, there should be a link to the PDF version of the application form. So I'll let you guys bring that up yourselves, but the application form is split into 5-ish sections, and they are personal details, qualifications and experience, the project itself, a question on how you think the early career grant would impact on you, and finally your referee details. Next slide, please. So the first section is your personal details. This is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to run through some key parts of each section. But yeah, the personal details section is pretty easy and straightforward. We do ask if you are a member. Now, it's not a problem if you are not a member. And your funding partner will fund your membership for the duration of your project. But as Nisreen alluded to earlier, for the first time, RSTMH members will be given exclusive access to certain streams of funding. And then we'll also ask for your contact details, in particular, your email address. So you need to provide details that will be valid for 2-ish years from the point of applying. So that covers the application stage, the duration of the project, and then the reporting stage after. If for whatever reason any of your contact details change, your phone number changes, your email address changes, please do let us know as soon as possible, because we liaise with our awardees a lot. And so it's super important that we are able to get hold of you. And then the next section is about qualifications and experience. In terms of employing organization, now ideally awardees would be employed and so therefore provide details of that organization. But we know that this isn't always the case, for example, if a student is applying for the early career grant. So if you're not employed, please provide details of the supporting organization instead. And then after that, we ask about experience, achievements, and qualifications. And this is so that we can get a good sense where you are in your career so far. And remember that this program is for early career individuals, so please be honest about your level of experience. Next slide, please. And then we get into the sort of main part of the application form. What is the project itself? Like I said at the start of this, the form is relatively straightforward to complete versus some other grant forms you may have come across. So what we have is your project title, which is only up to 20 words. It is important to have a clear title, as this is what goes on our website. So it needs to be clear, but it also needs to be concise. We then ask for a non-technical description, and this is really important as your application will be read by numerous people who might not have the same understanding of the project or topic area as you do. So the description should really be easily understood by someone who doesn't know the subject that well, or if at all. Then you've got your project start and end date. Like I mentioned before, the project needs to start between September and December of this year and be completed within within the year, or within a year, sorry. And then there is a question about how much of your project is lab work. The reason we ask this is because one of our funders will not fund lab-based projects, so it's good for us to know this. And then we ask for a detailed project statement, which is up to 1,500 words. Now, this is your main place to describe your project, so it needs to flow really well from start to end. And that's why in the form, if you have the PDF open, you'll see that we've provided headings to help with this. And we would really suggest that you use these, as they will help with your flow and ensure you capture the right information about your project. And the same with references. If you decide to use references for your project statement, we would suggest that you use the styling that we have put in the application form. And then it goes to research milestones. So we want to know what your aims are for progress each quarter and any anticipated challenges that could impact on your project. We do ask for quarterly project updates during the course of your project, so these milestones line up nicely with that. And then finally, there's a question about if you've had other research funding in your name before. Again, remember this program is for individuals who have not received funding of £5,000 plus in their own name before. Next slide, please. And then the budget. So you might have wondered why I hadn't brought this up yet, but it needs its own slide. So I think the budget is probably one of the most challenging but important aspects of designing your application. We have seen in past years that this is where many applicants do fall down because they don't provide a clear or complete budget. So we will thoroughly scrutinise the budgets as part of the assessment process in terms of their accuracy and reasonableness. So it is really important that your costs are complete and researched and laid out as clearly as possible, and that you've provided a clear rationale for why these costs have been included. So what you see here is just an example of a good budget in terms of the layout and the format. You can see that there's a clear rationale. You can see that there are the costs have been put in clearly. The costs also add up to that total at the bottom. Please make sure that your total does add up to what is in the whole budget. And they have used the add-ins that we have suggested that they use in the application form. So you have the budget item, the quantity of that item, the unit cost per item, that's super important. Please provide those where you can, the total amount and the reason for this item. It is really important to sort of nail your budget at the application stage. Providing a detailed, clear budget now will make not only your project stand out more, but save us having to bother you with lots of questions about it later on down the line. We hopefully will put some examples or more examples of good budgets on our grants guidance page soon. And this is just an example. It doesn't have to look like this at all. It isn't an exhaustive list of costs, but it's more about showing the level of information that we need and the importance of laying it out clearly. Just a note that you can find a list of eligible and ineligible costs in our terms and conditions, which we will put into the chat. Oh, and just a heads up, please do keep hold of your receipts. Receipts and any sort of proof of purchase are needed by us and our partners for at least 7 years for auditing purposes. So please hold on to those. And next slide, please. Okay, this is the final part of the application form, sorry. So the next part of it is that question I referred to earlier. How would an early grant or early career grant impact your career? So this question is a really, really powerful tool, because the program isn't just about funding robust research, but for us, it's about empowering that next generation of researchers as they get underway in their career. Therefore, we really want to hear about you and why this grant is important to you and how it can impact you. This is an opportunity to really talk about yourself and what this could mean. And that's very unique. And finally, the referee details. So we asked for 2 references, which must be uploaded before the deadline, which is the 22nd of April. First is from your supervisor, The second is from a senior member of your employing or supporting organization. When you fill out the form, you'll see that you can submit your reference requests to your 2 referees before you submit your application form. And we've done this so you have as much time to chase these references as possible. Do chase them and then chase again, because any applications without 2 completed references by the deadline will be declined. We ourselves cannot chase any outstanding references. This is something that you will have to do. So really do keep a check on that. And this is why it's important to have a supportive or select a supportive supervisor. You need someone who is going to be reachable and willing to support you as much as possible during the application stage as well as the project stage, and that they have the time and the inclination to submit the necessary paperwork. So do chase. And I think that's the application form done. I'm going to head back to Amelia.
Thank you, Sian. So once you've completed your application form and you've hit submit, that will then send a reference request. And once that's completed and your application's finished, then it comes back to RSTMH to review. So the next stages can really be broken up into 3 key important areas for the review process. So the first one is the initial sift that RSTMH conducts internally. So we sort of cross-check our eligibility checks. So that may be that the form isn't completed properly, it's missing sections, the references aren't complete. You may have been a previous awardee and unfortunately are therefore unable to apply. You may have submitted more than 1 application. And the other key reason is that the form isn't in English, unfortunately. Then the next stage is that RSTMH assign the applications to our global assessors. Next slide, please, Io. And our global assessors is a group of volunteers who are based sort of around 80 countries, and they support us with reviewing our grant applications. And so each application is assigned to 2 global assessors, and they decide whether the application is suitable for funding. They have experience from wide-ranging disciplines, including medicine, academic research, and so forth. The common issues that prevent them scoring highly is that it's difficult to understand the project, the form isn't completely complete, the budget or time frame doesn't add up, and there isn't enough information about the project from the applicant. And so global assessors are really looking for this key criteria when reviewing your application. So that is if you meet our early career status, sort of your research question, and the quality of the project design and its methodology. They also take in consideration the feasibility of delivering the research outcomes you've detailed, taking in consideration the amount of funding you have requested. And therefore, your budget is a really key part of your application. So it needs to be reasonable and accurate. And sort of our global assessors are often based in the same countries, and they've got a really good idea of sort of what's reasonable within that project budget. And also impact is also taken into consideration and value for money. And once the global assessors have finished their reviews, the final stage is matching the fundable applications to our donor criteria and RSTMH's criteria. So the application may be declined because it does not meet the donor criteria, or it's not eligible for funding via RSTMH, or it has much criteria but isn't as competitive and has scored overall lower than the other applications. Unfortunately, due to the vast amount of applications we receive, feedback is not supplied. Next slide, please. What we've done here, as you can see, is we've sort of gathered some top tips from our global assessors and previous grant awardees. You can read them in detail, and we will be sharing the slides after the webinar. But there are some really key tips that I would sort of really take away from this, and that is to start your application early. Although it's open for a long period of time, do get it in and really think about what you're applying with in your project. Really utilize all of the guidance on the RSTMH website. So we've got the terms and conditions, we've got top tips, we will have this video, we've got a really good set of FAQs. The next tip I would say is to really ensure that you select a supportive supervisor that's going to feed and sort of support you during the duration of your project. And I would also suggest talking to your peers and those more senior in your networks and ask for feedback on your project, the ideas, its objectives, and its impact. Please do let us know if you have any other questions about this in the Q&A, and I'll pass back to Sean.
Thank you, Amelia. So I think we just got one more slide left. So yeah, the thank you slide and time for questions. So before we get into questions, these are just some of the resources we would highly recommend that you read before you start writing your application or as you are writing your application. So I think quite a lot of them are already in the chat, but our grants page is your best place to start. And then our terms and conditions, our FAQs, and that guidance page. All of these things can be found on our grants page. So, but the guidance page in particular, there are examples of good project statements, links to previously awarded projects, and there's hopefully going to be more to follow. Just to note that there will be a more detailed guidance session for members, on key elements of the application process. And the date is still being confirmed, but it's looking likely it will be the 20th of March. So just a heads up there to our members. Speaking of members, if you did decide, oh, I really want to become an RSTMH member now, if you sign up today or anytime in March, you can receive a 20% discount with the code grants2024. And if you do have any questions, please email Nisreen if it's about membership, or myself if it's about grants. Now, like I said, we won't be able to answer everyone's questions today, especially those that are more individual specific. So we'll definitely take any questions that you have if you submit them by email. And I think that's it really. Yeah.
I think there is a few questions for membership that I did miss that have come through since. Just to clarify, you can still apply for a grant. So there's been quite a few questions around that if you're not a member at the moment. However, as I mentioned, the exclusive funding that is for RSTMH members. So basically, if you do apply, your application will be put in specifically eligible for the funding that we have for RST members. Whereas previous years, it was open to non-members and members. So it's a bit of a difference this year. The other questions I had was regarding what type of membership. I have put in the FAQ page there, what gives you a big breakdown of what type of whether if you're early careers or students, if you're not too sure, who's eligible for lower income country membership. So I've dropped in the chat there, what gives you a good breakdown. I've also answered some questions in the answer section for you, so you can review it there as well. And as Sean mentioned, if you do have any questions for me, please do drop me an email. I'm happy to answer them for you. And the grants code is specifically for those who have joined and is not a member as of today. So it won't be on our website. But as I mentioned, it is grants2420, and that's it. So but if you have any difficulties with payments or the discounts code, again, just do drop me an email.
Thank you, Nisreen. Just following on from that, I did see that there was a question that if you become an RSTMH member, does that guarantee automatic funding? No, it doesn't mean that. What it means is that we have RSTMH has a specific pot of money that it will go towards RSTMH members whose projects might not necessarily match with other donors, but they're high scoring and they're a member of us. Whereas in the past, as Nisreen said, it was open to high scoring projects of members and non-members. So this year it will be for members only. So it doesn't guarantee that your project will be funded, but it means you will be eligible for funding from that pot. So what we're going to do is answer some of the questions now. what I have done is, thank you for voting, by the way, on questions you would like us to answer. And I have sorted these questions by most popular, by most upvoted. So I think we've answered the top question, which was from Chelsea, about what does exclusive funding for early career grants mean? Nisreen covered that. Then there is a question, I've seen that there's been a couple of questions about funding of lab-based research projects. So one of our biggest funders is NIHR, and as part of their criteria, they do not fund lab-based projects. So this is why we think it's really important that you keep an eye on our partners list, which is on our grants page, because we will be adding more as they come through. Not all of our funders have that requirement, but NIHR certainly do. So it is something that you should bear in mind. Does anyone have anything else to add to that point?
No, Sean, I think that's a good point. I would say that I would still encourage, really encourage applications from lab-based research and projects. NHI are one of our partners, but we hope to have more this year.
Sorry, I'm just making my way through. That one's been answered. Does a PhD scholarship count as research funding? So we do fund research projects from people who are doing a PhD or even a master's, but the funding must go towards the direct costs of the research project. It cannot go towards tuition fees.
And just to clarify that, yes, the actual funding of your PhD does not count as the £5,000 grant in your own name before.
Is there an age restriction? So I guess in theory, no, but although this program is for early career researchers and people who are still in the start of their career, it goes back to that point we made about you have to be ready to carry out a research project with supervision, of course, but you need to be comfortable and competent to carry out a research project from the designing stage all the way through to outcomes. So whilst there is no age restriction, and we have purposely not got an age restriction, because we know that early career can mean different things to different people, and people go into different careers at different stages of their lives. You have to think about it in terms of, do you feel ready enough and have the necessary experience to carry out a research project from start to finish? Do keep asking your questions, and do keep voting for the questions that you want us to answer. Is an undergraduate student eligible to apply? Again, I would say, and Amelia, do let me know if I'm wrong here. Again, in theory, yes, but it all depends if you have the experience and competencies that we've already listed. We don't tend to see many applications from undergraduate students because of this, but like I said, there's no age restriction on this program. Does the supervisor need to be based in the same institution as yourself? For instance, if you are employed by a university but want to develop a project supervised by someone elsewhere. Now that is a good question. I'll let Amelia take this one if that's okay.
Thank you. Your supervisor does not have to be in the same country or the same institution as yourself. However, they really have to feel that they can strongly supervise and support your grant. So therefore, I would speak to the supervisor that you would like and to see if they believe that that is feasible. But they do not have to be in the same country. As long as they feel like they can give you ample supervision within your project, then that's fine.
Thank you, Amelia.
And there's another one which is interesting. It says if one has a suitable project that's only going to last for a few months, less than 1 year, are they able to apply? And yes, they are. We know that there are certain projects will be in around 3 or 4 months duration, particularly sort of and that is perfect. You're perfectly able to apply for that project.
Thank you, Amelia. Now, I'm just looking through some of the questions. Some of them are quite specific, and we might need to take some time after this to answer them. But rest assured, we will try and answer as many as we can. I know that there's still a few questions coming through about lab-based projects and the chances of receiving funding for a lab-based project. It is really hard to say. It all depends on our funders, but just to echo Amelia's point, if you have a really good research project and it is a lab-based project, please don't feel dissuaded from sending it in to us. We are still funding lab-based projects. It's just that one of our funders doesn't. Is there a particular theme for this year's application call? No, there is no theme. If it's on global health and or tropical medicine, then that's the most important thing. We're not asking for particular topics, particular diseases. There's no restrictions on theme.
And that's a good question, Charles. And that relates to also one here which says projects related to cancer research. Do you provide funding? And yes, we have in the past. So yes, we do. And I would really, just to say again, I would really check our website because you can see all the titles of previous projects there. So that will give you a real idea of all of these questions around topics and as if your topic is able to be funded.
Yeah, and just following on from that, just one more point. Again, that we do have funders that do fund specific topics, although they're quite small. So we have, for example, IACS, which funds scabies projects, ITI, which funds trachoma projects, but then a funder like NIHR, they fund a whole sort of plethora of topics. So again, if it's a good idea, and if you're confident in your application, do send it.
I can also see here what another question, which is about applying as part of a group. Is it allowed to apply as a part of a group? And the answer is no. There is only one PI on your project, and that is the person who's applying. So only individuals are allowed to apply for our grants. These are because the grant is actually paid to your individual bank account and does not go through your institution.
Thank you, Amelia. I'm just resorting the questions again. And yeah, so Amelia's answered about co-funding.
Co-funding, just to talk a little bit more about that, co-funding in the sense that as long as you have not started your project and you haven't finished your project previously, you are allowed to use co-funding for an RSTMH grant in the sense that as long as that the part of your project is detailed enough for RSTMH to fund, you are allowed to seek other funding for a different section of that project. And also just a significant part of the study can be desktop research that is permitted.
Yeah, our scope is really big, really open. It's about funding and empowering people new to the world of research in the field of tropical medicine and global health. So we have seen a wide range of studies on a wide range of things, and with different focuses, different sort of research styles. So yeah, absolutely, desktop-based research. We're absolutely happy to receive applications on that. I did see one that's just, oh, there it is. Is the £5,000 amount for a single grant? What if the applicant has had 2 grants of less than that amount each, but when totaled, the amount exceeds 5,000? So this is a good question. To qualify or be eligible for this program, you can't have received a grant of £5,000 or more. So in this case, if it's less than £5,000, then you would still be eligible, even if you've had, say, 2 grants of 2,500. Bear with me a second. Okay, so this is a popular question from Mandira. I am originally from an LMIC, but currently pursuing my PhD in Australia. The NIHR funding requires applicants to be based in and conduct their work in LMIC. Does my situation meet the criteria if I plan to carry out my project in my home country, which is LMIC? So, yeah, that's a really good question. As far as I'm aware, that wouldn't meet NIHR funding then, because you're based in Australia but carrying out the research somewhere else. Do let me know if I've got that wrong, Amelia.
I think it's quite a detailed question. I think it's on an individual case.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you apply, because although you may not meet the NHIR criteria, it doesn't necessarily mean you won't meet other funders. Well, that would meet other funders' criteria. There are a few other factors to take into account when reviewing this. It may be also dependent on the bank account details that you give. So if you're giving a details of the bank account in your local in your original country, or where you are currently based in Australia, and if you will be finished your PhD in Australia before the project. There are a few other factors to take into account. I would therefore recommend anyone who has a similar question to apply.
Thank you, Amelia. There is a question about what are the maximum number of submissions accepted. So the answer to this is 1. Please don't submit more than 1 application per year, that is. And then I saw a question about feedback, and you're absolutely right. In an ideal world, we would love to give feedback, especially as this program is aimed at empowering people in the early stages of their research career. And part of that is receiving feedback. But with the growth of the program in the last 6 years and the fact that there's only 8 of us and only 1 grants manager, with all the sort of intention in the world, we can't provide feedback. We do try and collate general feedback that we can pass on to applicants, and that will then help people who want to apply the year after. But we're just not in a position to give detailed feedback, and that is a shame. And I completely understand why it's important to have, but we just don't have the capacity to do that, I'm afraid. So I'm just going to take a sip of water as my mouth has gone a bit dry. I'm just looking through to see if there are questions that we haven't sort of spoken about already. There's a lot of questions about co-funding, which I think Amelia has covered. And yes, we do accept projects that are also looking for co-funding.
Yes, and there's also the one that currently has 7 upvotes. If undertaking a field or lab project, if you already have funding for reagents and consumables via your team, but just need funding for travel to your country of interest to undertake the project, are you still eligible to apply? Yes, you are. However, I would really look at our terms and conditions, because there are some caps around the amount of your project budget to be used towards travel. So I would just review the terms and conditions and sort of just think about what you would be applying for within your project budget.
Thank you, Amelia.
And there's another one which I think is a really good question. Must your project budget total exactly £5,000? No, it cannot be over £5,000, but often the budgets that we receive are often less than 5,000. So it's whatever you feel you need to complete your project to its best ability.
And then another popular question is from Manuela. I have a question regarding the award being deposited in our personal bank account. For my institution, to prove that I've won a grant and thus to prove that I am advancing in my career, I would have to have received the grant at the university. Would it be possible to deposit the grant at the university rather than my personal account? Now, ideally, we would deposit the money into your personal bank account. It is an individual, it is, our program is for individual awardees, not for institutions. Now, there are sort of rare cases, and we know that that's not always possible for everyone, depending on each person's situation. So there are exceptions, but as a rule, a general rule, we do fund or transfer the money to the awardee's bank account.
We just to add to that, we would sort of need some explanation from your institution, and we are aware, as Sean said, of case by case. For example, some countries have some quite strong regulations around this, for example India, and we are aware of that. So yes, thanks, Sean.
No worries, we're getting through these. Do keep submitting your questions. We do see them, but there are just a lot to get through. Again, we will tackle some of these after. I think we've asked that one. I've been working on snakebite epidemiology, but I'm alone. I don't have any institutional affiliation. My question is that how should I apply for the grant because I don't have any reference? We did mention in the presentation that we know that not everyone is employed or isn't at the stage of being employed by an organization. They might be a student, for example, but we do need our applicants to have a supervisor, and we do need our applicants to have referees who can verify the competencies of the applicants. So yeah, we will need our applicants to have 2 referees and a supervisor. Are research projects related to mental health and psychology eligible to apply? Yes, absolutely. These are increasingly important topics within the world of global health. So yes, please do apply. Like I said, if it's a good idea and it's a topic that's within global health, tropical medicine, yeah, apply. Okay, that one's been answered.
There's one here which says, please, what happens if you work in collaboration with members of your previous institution and not your current employer? Which of them do you declare? So as Sean has detailed, there are 2 references on your application form. One of those is from the direct supervisor of your project, and that is up to you to decide if that is based at your institution or at your previous institution. The second one is from your current employer, and therefore that is what you would need to use. If you have an employer, for example, if you're a student, then we understand that you don't currently have an employer, and you're able to explain that on the form.
Again, I can see quite a few questions about the sort of lab-based work and what that means for your project. There is a question here about what proportion of a project needs to be lab orientated for it to be considered lab-based. That's really tough. It's quite a difficult one to answer. Again, we would just come back to the point that there will be funding for projects with lab-based projects. So please don't be deterred by that. Do apply.
There's also one here which it's interesting. Does the time period of the 1 year also include the time for IRB approval, or should our projects have already received approval by the time we apply? That 1 year does include time for approval and ethical approval. There is also some sort of caps around the cost of ethical approval within our terms and conditions. So I would really suggest reviewing those as well while you're complying your project budget.
Thank you, Amelia.
There's also a good question here. Sorry, Sean.
No, absolutely, go for it.
which is really important, and it comes up a lot. Can part of the budget be allocated to salary payments for the individual who is applying for the grant? So again, I would really recommend reviewing our terms and conditions, particularly the budget sections around there. Salary payments are not permissible, per diems are. There are also some caps on those. So I would really suggest having a look at the grants website page for more details. And there is also on the FAQ page, there is also a detailed question that responds to this.
Cheers, Amelia. Then we have a question. Does the supervisor need to be physically present at the study site throughout the conduct of study? No, they don't. But what we would suggest is that you find a supervisor who is able to support you and your needs. We can't sort of emphasize enough how important it is to have a supportive supervisor. You're going to come across things that you might not have expected, some challenges, and they need to be there to answer any questions or concerns that you have. So whilst they don't have to be necessarily with you every step of the way, they need to be reachable, and you need to feel confident that they will help you and support you throughout the course of your project. And I guess what each individual applicant will need will differ person by person. Oh, Nizreen, I've just seen there's a question about the discount code. It seems to have generated an error, but we can look into that.
If you do receive any errors, please do just drop me an email, and then I can get back to you and give you a payment link that will send you directly with the code. And also, just to go over again, so I've received a few emails. So you can be a non-member or a member to apply for the career grants.
Following on from what I just said, there's a question about what exactly is expected from referees. Are they expected to oversee the project as supervisors? No. So our referees, you've got two referees, your supervisor and a senior member from your organization. And what we ask of them is a reference to sort of verify who you are and that they believe you are ready to carry out this project. So your supervisor will support you throughout the duration of your project, but they also need to provide a reference during the application stage, as does that senior member from your organization. And we have Tamar joining us now. Hello, Tamar. I think we're just sorting out microphones. Hello. So I'm sure she doesn't need much of an introduction, but just in case, Tamar is our CEO, and she's here to join us for the questions part. So if there are any questions that myself or Amelia aren't able to answer, then Tamar is here. And if there's anything that she feels needs to be said about the grants program that we might have missed, yeah, Tamar, feel free to emphasize any points that you have.
I'm just having a look through the
Oh, I can't hear you. Your microphone seems to have cut out.
Is that better?
Yeah. So Tamar, what might be helpful is that we've had quite a few questions about RSTMH funding and why it's now exclusive to RSTMH members, and what does that mean for people who aren't RSTMH members? So maybe you can just sort of explain that in a bit more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, we're a membership society, so we work with our members to try and improve their careers. Now, the grants program, we know over the years, is something that the whole community needs to benefit from. So we've not restricted it to our members in the past. Anyone can apply, as I'm sure you know from Sian and the presentation so far. And our donors pay for membership very kindly for their awardees that they fund, so that awardees can benefit from everything that comes with membership, many other benefits that would really help during the projects being delivered. And that might include webinars, specific training, access to other information and so on. But our members were, I guess, concerned that they didn't really have an advantage, a competitive advantage to achieve the grants, even though they're very engaged with our work and part of our network. So this is a compromise, really, that we've said that, okay, going forward, our donors will fund anybody, and you probably know that our donors contribute to around 200 of the funded awards every year out of about 210 or so. But for our own awards, we need to make sure that we are putting members first as a priority. And so our own funding is just for members. Still, it means the vast majority of people that apply do not have to be members, but hopefully if they get awarded and our donors pay for their membership, they'll really enjoy it and consider staying with us as part of our small network of members, growing but small network of members, compared to those in our huge community around the world. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tamar. Going back to the conversation on supervisors, because I've seen another question come through and it's one that I've got a few emails on. Can you use the same supervisor with another applicant? So the answer to this is yes. A supervisor can supervise more than one applicant, but we would just sort of like to emphasize the point that a supervisor has to be able to provide an adequate level of support and also be there for the whole duration of your project. So depending on how many awardees they're supervising, this could then make it tricky. So we would suggest that, or advise that, a supervisor doesn't supervise more than 2, maximum 3 awardees.
I can see a couple of questions, Sian, that I can answer directly if that helps. One is about secondary data analysis.
Yeah.
So, and that's from Jean Tristan. If you're not conducting any primary analysis yourself, so you're just using other data, then it would not be eligible. This is about conducting your own research from scratch. Now, that might be a field visit, it might be survey-based community project, it might be a hospital-based project, but it must be your own work that you're conducting as research. So hopefully that answered that one. And then I saw another one in here, which was about questioners from Dungani Dhaka. Can I put someone who has awarded this grant before as my supervisor? Yes, you can. And many of our supervisors are have been grant awardees in the past, and in fact many of our global assessors who mark the grant applications have also been grant awardees in the past, so they have a really good understanding of the project and the program and what we're trying to do. So that's an easy answer. There's another question I can answer if it's helpful around mentors, referees. So there's a question from Lukman at Damola. If you answered that one already, should I cover that one?
No, I think I've been sort of once we've answered a question, I've filed them, so that should be answerable.
I'll go for that one. So this is about whether you can have more than 2 mentors, referees for the project. So this is a specific answer really for this one. You need to have one supervisor and an additional reference. So the supervisor is the person that needs to support you throughout your project. I know that Sian will have covered that, and they will be asked questions from us at the end of your project around how the outcomes and around how the budget and the spend worked out for you, and how they feel it was achieved. So they need to be really close to your work and understand what you're doing with your project. You only need one other reference person, and that person is only involved at the initial stages on the form. We don't contact your second reference unless we have issues contacting you and or your supervisor. So you only need those 2 people. I suppose you could, in fact, I don't think there's a place on the form to put a third referee in, but 2 good references is all you need. So hopefully that answers that one.
Tamar, there's another question in the chat which I think links to that, which would be good for you to talk a bit more in detail about. What if you aren't employed but have an academic affiliation? Can you still apply?
Yeah, so you can still apply. It would be up to the assessor who looks at, or the 2 assessors that look at your application to decide whether they feel you have adequate support. So I would put their details on your form, maybe make a note of that within your form to explain the relationship you have with them. And then it's down to the assessors to have a look and decide whether they feel that that's a good environment and strong enough in terms of supporting you. There's a question that's come in from, oh, it's just moved, around dollars or euros. Can the research budget be in other currencies? Whereas you might construct your budget in any currency that's best for you, we need your application to show your budget in GB pounds. That is the way that we will provide the grant to you in pounds, and therefore we need you to have translated it into pounds for us within your budget, within your application form. We do understand that there are exchange issues that might happen, and there is a line for contingency in the budget, which you'll see if you look at the eligible cost list. And I would advise you to think about a contingency around your exchange rate differences that you might see. So hopefully that answers that one as well. Another one that I can see from MySO is around ethical approval before the application deadline. This is really up to you, and it depends on the uniqueness of your project. Most of our awardees don't have the ability to do that because that involves a fee in many countries, and so they put their application in, and part of their budget is the ethical approval cost that they have to then pay to have their project go through ethical approval. It is really advisable to make sure that you're sense checking, obviously, your project with your supervisor, who hopefully has good experience of ethical approval procedures and will be able to say to you whether there is likely to be an issue. Once, and I'm sure Sian's covered this already, once your project has been approved, that's the assessor saying that this particular project in this location, done in this way, over this time frame, costing this amount, is awardable. Any change to that would have to be reassessed, and you'd have to fall out of that cohort and start again. So if you feel that a methodology or some part of your project might be questionable by the ethics committee, make sure that you've spoken to your supervisor and got their advice beforehand. And then, as I say, most people actually pay for the ethical approval process once they've got their award, because that's the only way they can afford to do so. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Tamar. I've seen a couple of questions come through relating to first dates and also experience. So I'm just going to touch on experience first. There's one question about what is the maximum years of experience and what is the limit to maximum years of experience when it comes to funding. There is no maximum years of experience. When we were going through the presentation, we talked about the fact that we don't have an age-based description of early career. It's quite a loose definition. So we would say if you feel that you meet the criteria and you haven't received a funding of £5,000 or more for a grant in your name, then please apply. There isn't an age restriction. In terms of dates, there was one question about, can we fund a project that's already started or will have started by the time of funding? We can't, I'm afraid. We can't fund retrospectively. So the timeline that we gave in the presentation, aiming to notify awardees by September. Like I said, the timeline we've put together is based on previous years and average number of applications we expect to receive. But if there are more, then it may hold us up a little bit. Now, I know that we had a bit of delay with awarding 2023 funding. I don't know if Tamar wants to maybe touch on that a bit, but that is the timeline we're working towards. So if we award funding in September, you need to start your project within 3 months of being awarded funding. So up to December of this year, if we stick with the timeline that we've put in the presentation. But if there are any changes or there are any delays, we will let you know.
I can say something about 2023 if that's helpful. So some of you may have applied last year and may have had a slightly delayed feedback decision from us. Last year, we did not expect another increase in the number of applications. And we had, I think it was a 350 increase on the year before. And alongside that, many more people understanding the eligibility and making sure the references were in on time. Overall, that meant that there were many more assessments, 500, I think, than the year before that, which of course, every assessment takes time, needs to be done carefully by our assessors. And then the team are then looking at that, analysing that data, and working out which of the applications are fundable and which are not, and making then the links to donor criteria. So for reasons which include being slightly more overwhelmed with numbers than we thought, also some delays on the donor side in finalising some of the partnerships. The most important one being we have an amazing partnership with NIHR, so through DHSC, and we're really pleased that we signed a 3-year agreement with them at the end of last year. But that did mean that funding for 2023 was delayed by about 4 months. So that's those two reasons combined are why the 2023 cohort is starting at the moment, which is quite late. But good to say that we've almost finished awarding and paying out those awards. So we'll quite quickly be putting our full attention to the 2024 applications.
Thank you, Tamar. I'm just looking through the remaining questions. I know that there are still quite a few lab-based questions, and we will put something together on that, but we really don't want to dissuade you from applying if you have a really good lab-based idea. There was one I saw. No, sorry, Tamar.
Sorry, I was going to say on the lab-based work. So there, I can see some questions that have been repeated, and so I can answer that one, and a couple of others. So yes, lab-based work does mean the part of your project which is involving the use of a laboratory. That might be just doing a very small part of your testing, or it might be a major part. It's important that in your form you're clear with the amount of lab testing work, just because some of our donors include a lab in their criteria, and be clear on the amount. So if you're doing an extensive field study, but you're at the end of your study, you're spending a short amount of time on one particular lab test, be clear when you are talking through your project statement exactly where your project is going to be delivered, the emphasis of that. Now, that is something we can tell a bit from your budget. So if you imagine the budget breakdown, where your majority of budget sits is where the majority of your project is going to be undertaken, you might imagine. So we can get a feel for that, but sometimes it is really difficult to understand the amount of work that's being carried out in a laboratory. So do be very clear about it. And I think that covered the ones I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just seeing if there are any other quick ones that I can.
Yeah.
There's a question about climate change. Yes, if it's health related, do submit projects based on climate change. There's very little, there's a lot of research around the vector control in climate change, but there's still many aspects of global health where climate change will have an impact and is having an impact, and we're not seeing research studies. So really happy to see those if you have those ideas for a project.
Tamar, I'm throwing all the questions at you now. There's one question that I think is really important to answer. Does grant support publication fees?
No, it doesn't. And that's because the vast majority of our grant awardees don't necessarily achieve scientific publication. That doesn't mean to say they're not disseminating their work. It doesn't mean to say that they won't achieve a research publication in the future, but within the time frame of the project, the vast majority do not achieve that. And therefore we can't include it in the budget. However, we are looking as a team at RSTMH at the ways that we can use our scientific journals to benefit our grant awardees. So thinking about the possibility of publishing abstracts for those that want their abstract published. Also, we have waivers for many countries, and you can find the links, you can find that information on the website. And also we have discounts. So as a grant awardee, you would be a member. Members have a 10% discount on open access fees. So there are many ways in which you get support in publishing, but it can't be part of your actual grant budget.
Thank you, Tamar. I think we'll take one more question. And I did have a good one, but I have lost it. Where
They
did it
move,
go?
don't they?
They do.
Sorry, I'm trying to answer as many as I can. I think that may be.
That's good.
No, that's absolutely fine. That's great. What happens after receiving the award and the supervisor isn't able to support you the way you would want? Would it be allowed to change a supervisor with notification of RSTMH? The answer to that, and if I'm wrong, let me know, Tamer, the answer is no. And this is why it's really important that you carefully select your supervisor and think about if they are going to be able to give you the level of support that you need, because once you have selected your supervisor, you're not allowed to change them. And maybe we've got time for one more question. So if there's a golden question anyone can see. And yes, we will be sharing the recordings and we will be sharing a link to the presentation.
I see a question that's a really important one about supervisor organizational emails. Part of our due diligence is to make sure that because we're paying our grants out to personal bank accounts in many countries, and it's lovely that we're paying out so many now, but it does obviously for our donors that poses a level of pressure on us to make sure that we conduct full due diligence on everybody that we pay to, and as a UK charity, the Charity Commission provides that pressure as well. So part of the due diligence is that we need to verify the supervisor at the organisation that they say they are based at. So they would need an organisational email. Now I know that there are many cases where supervisors don't have one ordinarily, but they can apply to one. To have one. I know there are other cases where the institution just does not permit it because for various reasons. And in that case, we would look to speak to the supervisor and think of another way that we could verify their position with the institution. That could be something on headed paper from the dean or the most senior person in the organisation. I don't want to say what we would definitively do because it is really done on a case-by-case basis. But the short answer is it's much more difficult if your supervisor doesn't have an organisational email, because we do have to carry out that as part of our due diligence. So do, if you can, encourage them to, if that's an application process, apply for that early, or be upfront in your form. In fact, the supervisor needs to be writing their reference on letterhead. So that's a good chance for them to talk about any issues that they may have around organisational email and make that case.
Thanks, Tamar. I think we're almost close to time, so I think we should stop there now. I feel that we've answered the sort of most common questions coming in, but we will look at all the questions, and if there's ones that we can answer after this webinar, we will put some responses together and get them out to you. And if we didn't answer your question, please feel free to drop me an email, sean.tapback@rstmh.org. I'm happy to answer any questions there. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that was really helpful. I hope you learned a lot. I know it was a lot of information, but I just wanted to emphasize the point that we're not expecting a perfect application or perfection from you. We realize that this is for people early in their career. A lot of these tips are just to help you maximize your chances of receiving funding. And it's also part of the learning curve when you apply for funding from other places as you advance in your career. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to receiving your application. And thank you, Io, Amelia, Nisreen and Tamar for supporting me with this.
Just to quickly mention, I've received a few emails around the discount code. It seems it might be an error with it at the moment. So as I said, if you are interested, do send me an email directly. My email is nisreen.hamad@rstmh.org. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good luck.
Bye. Good luck.
you.
Bye.